He almost didn't go, standing outside the restaurant in his one decent jacket, keys still warm in his pocket from the drive. David Martinez nearly turned around and drove home to his 6-year-old daughter instead. Blind dates felt like a luxury he couldn't afford anymore. Not with a full-time job, a kid to raise alone, and a bank account that barely stretched from one paycheck to the next. But something made him push open that door. Maybe it was hope. Maybe it was just tired loneliness. Either way, nothing could have prepared him for who was waiting inside. Before we continue, if stories like this move you, please hit subscribe and give this video a like. Drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. This channel is called Kindness Waves, and every story here is about ordinary people doing extraordinary things with a little bit of heart. Now, let's get back to David. David Martinez was 34 years old, and life had not gone the way he planned. 5 years ago, his wife had passed away suddenly, leaving him with a 2-year-old daughter named Lily and a grief so heavy he sometimes forgot how to breathe. He worked as a mid-level accountant at a mid-sized logistics company in Ohio, the kind of job that paid the bills but never quite let him get ahead. Every morning, he dropped Lily off at his sister's house before work, and every evening he picked her up, made dinner, helped with her reading homework, and collapsed into bed by 9, exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. His sister, Carla, had been begging him for 2 years to try dating again. "You deserve happiness too, David," she would say. "Lily needs to see her dad smile, not just survive." He always brushed it off. Who would want a tired, single father with a kid, a modest apartment, and barely enough time to breathe? But Carla was persistent, and eventually, through a mutual friend, she set him up on a blind date. All he knew was her name, Diane. No photo, no last name, just a time and a restaurant. He almost didn't go, but he did. The restaurant was warm and quiet, the kind of place with soft lighting and linen napkins, a bit fancier than he was used to. He spotted a woman sitting alone near the window, perhaps in her mid-50s, dressed simply but elegantly, her silver-streaked hair pulled back, her posture calm and confident. He thought maybe she was waiting for someone else. He glanced around the room, nervous, scanning for someone closer to his own age. Then the hostess walked him straight to that same table. "Diane," he asked, his voice cracking slightly. She looked up, smiled warmly, and said, "You must be David. Please sit down." He sat, trying to hide his surprise. She was older than he expected, maybe 20 years older, and there was something familiar about her face that he couldn't quite place. They made small talk, awkward at first, the way blind dates often are. She asked about his work, and when he mentioned the name of his company, something shifted in her expression. "I know that company," she said carefully. "I own it." David felt his stomach drop. He looked at her again, really looked, and suddenly it clicked. Diane Whitfield, the CEO. He had seen her photo on the company's annual report, had heard her name mentioned in hushed, respectful tones in meetings he wasn't important enough to attend. He had shaken her hand exactly once, 2 years ago, at a company holiday party, in a crowd of 200 employees. She probably didn't even remember it. He, on the other hand, remembered everything about that night because it was the first time he'd worn a suit since his wife's funeral. "I had no idea," he stammered. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. This is incredibly awkward. You're my boss's boss's boss." Diane laughed, a genuine, warm laugh that put him slightly at ease. "David, please. Tonight, I'm not your CEO. I'm just Diane, a woman who agreed to a blind date because a mutual friend insisted, and honestly, I almost canceled 3 times. They talked for a while about safer topics, careful not to let the power imbalance sitting between them ruin the evening. But as the night went on, something real began to happen. Diane asked about Lily, and David's entire face changed when he talked about his daughter. He told her about Lily's crooked front tooth, her obsession with dinosaurs, the way she still slept with a stuffed elephant that used to belong to her mother. Diane listened, really listened, in a way most people didn't anymore. Then David asked about her life, expecting a story of corporate success and glamorous vacations. Instead, Diane told him something he never expected. 22 years ago, before she built her company into what it was today, she had been a young single mother herself, working 3 jobs, barely making rent, raising a son on food stamps and sheer determination. Her husband had left when their son was a baby, and she had built everything from nothing, one impossible decision at a time. "I don't often tell people that," she admitted, her eyes distant. "It's easy to look at where someone is now and forget what it took to get there." David felt something loosen in his chest, a tightness he hadn't realized he'd been carrying since he walked in. For the first time in years, he wasn't just the tired accountant everyone overlooked. He was a man sitting across from someone who genuinely understood the weight he carried, because she had carried it too. The date ended with an unspoken understanding that this wasn't the start of a romance, not with 2 decades and a corporate hierarchy between them, but it had become something else entirely, something rarer. Before they left, Diane reached across the table and gently touched his hand. "David, I want to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly. Are you happy at the company? Do you feel valued there?" He hesitated, then told the truth. He told her about the years of overtime with no recognition, the promotions that went to louder, less careful people, the quiet feeling of being invisible in a building he'd given 8 years of his life to. Diane listened without interrupting, nodding slowly. 3 weeks later, David was called into an unexpected meeting with senior leadership. He assumed it was bad news, a layoff, a reorganization, something to fear. Instead, he was offered a promotion to senior financial analyst, a role with better pay, better hours, and for the first time, real respect. There was no mention of the blind date. No favoritism, no scandal, nothing improper. Diane had simply asked HR to review the department's overlooked talent, something she said she did every few years to make sure good people weren't slipping through the cracks. David's name had come up on its own merit, his years of quiet, careful work finally noticed by people who actually looked. But what changed David most wasn't the promotion. It was the letter that arrived at his apartment 2 weeks later, handwritten from Diane. She thanked him for a lovely evening and told him something he would never forget. "You reminded me why I started this company in the first place, to build something where people like us, the ones who show up every single day without complaint, never have to feel invisible again." David kept that letter in his desk drawer. On hard days, when Lily was sick or the bills piled up or grief crept back and unexpectedly, he would read it again. It reminded him that one small act of kindness, one person truly listening, could change the entire direction of someone's life without any grand gesture at all. He never went on another date with Diane. Their paths crossed occasionally at company events, always warm, always respectful. 2 people who shared one unforgettable evening and a mutual understanding of what it means to struggle and to be seen. But David often told this story to Lily as she grew older, not as a romance, but as a lesson. He would tell her that kindness doesn't always look like flowers or grand gestures. Sometimes it looks like someone asking about your daughter's crooked tooth. Sometimes it looks like a CEO who remembers what it felt like to be invisible. Sometimes it's simply someone choosing to truly listen when they didn't have to. Years later, when Lily was in college, David still worked at that company, now a respected department head himself, and he made it a point to notice the quiet ones, the overlooked employees working hard without recognition, just as Diane had once noticed them. He would stop by their desks, ask about their families, remember small details, and make sure their work didn't go unseen. He became, in his own way, a small ripple of the same kindness that had once changed his life. Because that's the truth about kindness. It rarely announces itself with fireworks. It shows up quietly, in a shared dinner between 2 unlikely strangers, in a letter kept in a desk drawer, in someone choosing to truly see another person instead of walking past them. David never forgot that blind date. Not because it led to romance, but because it led to something far more lasting, the reminder that every single person carries a story worth listening to, and sometimes all it takes is one evening, one open heart, and one small act of kindness to change the course of someone's entire life. If this story touched you today, remember to carry a little more kindness into your own world tomorrow. You never know whose life you might quietly change.